We know he's got a thick skin. He's been hollered at multiple times this season. Sean Payton has all but blamed
twice
somebody.
very publicly.
Right. And earlier in the season, post-game, kind of had the blame for losses pinned on him by Sean Payton.
Right. True. You would have to look long and hard to find unambiguous words of praise issued by Sean Payton with respect to Russell Wilson. You'd have to look
especially
long
immediately
and
after a game.
hard to find unvarnished, unqualified praise of Russell Wilson delivered by Sean Payton. I challenge anyone in our audience. You can text in.
Yep, 303-831-1340 is that number.
You can call in. Give me an example. I could have missed something he said that was laudatory, but if he said anything truly laudatory, not obligatory, laudatory about Russell Wilson, I missed it. And this season has been going on for 15 weeks now. Not a word of unqualified praise from the coach, but 2 public outbursts against the quarterback. And in neither case did the quarterback strike back. Tom Brady would have struck back. Phil Simms would have struck back.
Russell Wilson's not.
Because they both did during their playing days. And Johnny Unitas would have struck back.
Well, we know John Elway.
Bart Starr, mild-mannered Bart Starr, went to Vince Lombardi and stood up to him, and Lombardi said, "You're right." And never again was Starr yelled at by Lombardi in front of the team.
The problem with this is pretty well established, especially when you're talking about coaching in 2023. Today over at Fox Sports 1 on Undisputed, Richard Sherman, who last year about this time was complaining and pointing out that Russell Wilson was essentially bound to fail because Russell Wilson's own challenges had led him to where he was in Denver. So, as you pointed out, not a guy that at least ever since Russell Wilson left the Broncos has missed too many chances to pile on, right?
They are not friends.
But here's what Richard Sherman said about Sean Payton's tantrum on the sideline in Russell Wilson's face.
That's not the way to coach him. That's not the way to coach really any quarterback. That's definitely not the way to talk to a veteran quarterback in the National Football League who's actually played pretty well for your team this season. I don't even see, usually when you're that upset and you're that animated, it's clear to everybody, to the world, what was wrong. Right then, I mean, I'm looking at what the ref's looking at, and I don't see a guy lining up off sides. So I'm not sure what you're calling out on Russ. He turned around, handed the ball off, probably ran the play you called, and you're getting upset at him. He's not yelling at you for not challenging 2 or 3 of those plays that could have easily changed the complexion of the game. But you're yelling at him, and when you yell at a quarterback like that and you're that animated on the national scene and outside for everybody to see, then what you're saying, Skip, is this is on him, not me. Hey, this is on him. Blame him for this. You see how upset I am at him? Because that's on him, and that's what you hate to see because, I mean, I just don't know what he could have done. You could have looked over at the line and said, hey, guard, back up a little bit. I've never seen a quarterback really adjust an offensive lineman or adjust an offensive line. You tell a receiver, hey, get on the ball, get off the ball. Hey, tight end, get on the ball, get off the ball. Hey, back, get back, or whatever the case may be. But I've never seen him say, grab an offensive lineman and pull him back or whatever the case may be because they line up initially.
And keep that in mind, too, before we get into this. Like I talked about, what's the quarterback's responsibility here? And Sherman hit exactly what I tried to hint at.
Right.
But, I mean, look, whether you think that should have been called or not is irrelevant. It was technically against the rules. It got called. Quinn Miners is the right guard. When he is lined up, I am not exaggerating, the football is about 30 inches from his face, give or take. Not even 3 feet from his face.
2.5.
So look down and a little bit to the left, which he probably does every single play. That is on Miners, and it's on Miners alone. Line up on sides. You're a professional. You've played football all your life. You know what onside is. Line up on sides. I get how it happens. I do. I get how it happens. It's a game played by humans. There's a clock going. I get it. At the same time, that's on Miners. If Payton's tantrum had continued on the sidelines. The cameras would have caught it, but he didn't go over to Quinn Miners and yell at him. You didn't have anyone else go over to Quinn Miners and yell at him. Just went on Wilson. And one of the points that Sherman makes is important because we talked about this earlier in the year, in the preseason, as a matter of fact. When Dr. Rick Perea was here, and we talked about the way that Vance Joseph's body language and what it sent to the team. Now, make of it what you will. A week after that, Vance Joseph's body language dramatically changed. But it's what it conveys to your team. And it's understanding the situation. That's conveying that to the team, but Richard Sherman brings up another point. The Broncos were the third of 3 NFL games on a Saturday. We know how dominant the NFL is in viewership. There was one NFL game going on. If you were watching football, just football, college, pro, anything, you were watching football on Saturday night, you were watching that game. You talk about situational awareness. Sean Payton knows he's got the only show in town, and he still chose to do that. That's not, if it's accidental, then there's definitely concerns about the way Sean Payton coaches his team. Because you can't control your temper enough to consider how that's going to factor in the way the rest of your teammate, the rest of the way your charges look at it.
I think both things are true.
Then that's a problem. If it's intentional.
I think he did it deliberately, and he can't control himself.
And it could be both.
He can't accept any responsibility for anything that goes wrong. It always has to be clear to everyone, anyone and everyone, not my fault.
And you know what? Earlier we were talking about it in the commercial break.
Officials are screwing me. The league is screwing me. Now, he hasn't been on that bent as much this year, but in other years he has been.
You mean since preseason?
Yeah,
he was in preseason.
He was with Seth Wickersham.
Not that long ago, with I'm forgetting Jordan Hill, USA Today as well.
But that was with Hackett, though.
Yeah,
ostensibly defending Wilson.
But talked
from
about
the criticism
how the league,
issued last year.
But you're right. With Wickersham talking about how the league was, kind of out to get him, and that was in this preseason. So that's part of it, and it's really. I'm not sure in that particular case what Wilson could do, and moreover, let's talk about that because maybe there's a little method to the madness. We talked about this during the break. I get that Payton is not entirely wrong when you challenge spots on the field. They're not often changed, but they are changed from time to time. They are. He should have challenged the McLaughlin play, even if it's a long shot, because there was a chance the McLaughlin could have been in, and it was a different down. It would have given you multiple more shots at it.
True.
That was the time to use it.
That was the one to challenge.
Because then you would be able to set up your next plays. And the head coach is totally in control of that, and the head coach didn't do it. And instead of maybe somebody asking him that, because, of course, that would have been a very valid question to ask, now you deflect and you throw a fit at your quarterback. And anyone asking about that, say, 90-second span of time where you could say, boy, should you have maybe challenged that play? Because now it's all going to be about Payton blowing up at Wilson.
Right.
So now it's easy to gloss over the fact that, you know what? Just clock management, down management, that was the one to challenge. And you chose not to. And you did address it with they don't normally overturn it. Well, they don't normally overturn most calls.
Right.
Most calls are not overturned. Coaches seem to want to challenge anyway.
But if he was yelling at him because he got up too quickly to line of scrimmage, didn't give him enough time to look at the play so they couldn't challenge it, there are 1,000 ways to express that without eviscerating Russell Wilson publicly in the manner that he did. I'm not even sure. I've been thinking about it. That was my first reaction, that he wanted to challenge, but he didn't have enough time, and Wilson got up to the line of scrimmage too fast. And maybe Wilson had been instructed to just hold off for a little bit so that they could look at it and decide whether to challenge. But that's not at all what Payton communicated after the game. And Payton's under this illusion that fans don't pay any attention, and even if they do, they're only fans, and most of them are stupid fans. That's always been Payton's attitude, and it's why he was disliked in New Orleans, even though he was a big winner. In some circles, he was disliked in New Orleans. That's the reason. He treated fans like dirt, at least in his professional capacity. I'm not speaking to the personal good deeds he did
Right.
At all. I'm talking, that's always been his attitude. This is kind of Parcells' attitude. And frankly, it's the attitude of a lot of coaches that the public's great because they spend a lot of money on football. But do we have to explain ourselves to the public? You'd have to be a dope not to understand that when you're speaking to the media, you're addressing the fans.
Right.
You're addressing the fans
at least
through the media. You'd have to be a
Right.
dope not to know that.
Well,
and he is not a dope. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care that he's despised out at the facility. He doesn't care that the players don't like him very much. And certainly, I'm guessing on the offensive side of the ball, they respect his knowledge, and they may even respect his teaching ability. I don't think they view him as anything but a fossil, a dinosaur, a coach out of the 50s who's trying to act like Lombardi the way Parcells tried to act like Lombardi, with considerably more success, by the way, than the junior version of Parcells has ever had.
it is a fascinating scenario that feels like it has been inevitable. I mean, even from the first game, but even prior to that. And some of this was the idea, and you talk about the stuff with the media, and I want to be careful with our colleagues, but that's an interesting part of this equation, too, where Sean Payton, at times, it's funny, it's kind of come around at parts to his way of thinking, because, yes, you're speaking to the fans through the media, but the way that any particular media outlet or media representative chooses to portray that is very different. As we know, there are outlets that are associated with the team or teams that are incentivized or even contractually obligated to not ruffle too many feathers.
Right.
And you and I know that because we've both worked in those capacities before.
Absolutely.
And
for many, many years. And
that's the reality. And you also have more of a enthusiast media, I guess the best way to put it, that maybe didn't exist before. And that's fine too. And you're still speaking to the fans. But these are the kind of days, Sandy, where I kind of look at it and think that this is sort of why, and maybe we're fossils, maybe we're dinosaurs, but that's why this is why we're doing the things we're doing, is because when you have people who are going to carry water for a team for various reasons, because look, it's a lot easier, hopefully, I think a lot of people believe it, to make sure the team is happy with you, and then maybe you'll get an interview that you might otherwise not get, or something like that. And I don't know, we're too old for that crap. I'm not going to deal with that nonsense anymore. And it's never been what we do. That's part of what this trick is. Part of this role in media should be and is, and I've talked about this before over the years, consumer advocacy, because the two most valuable assets you probably have in this world are time and money, in that order. And being a sports fan takes a lot of both. And so part of it is understanding in the media of our job is to portray to you what you're seeing so you can properly invest your time and money on something, because you want to know what you're spending it on. And the truth of the matter is teams, as Sandy elucidated very clearly there, may not always have the same incentive, right? Would the Broncos like to win football games? You bet. Would they like to win Super Bowls? You bet they would. You bet they would. Is making sure the stadium's sold out maybe a first priority because that's more controllable than winning Super Bowls? Yeah, also yes. Making money is the first thing. That's the trick. Making money is the first thing. The new owners didn't go drop $4.5 billion for funsies. So you have to keep that in mind as well. But this is a problem for the Broncos, and I hate to tell y'all, it's not going away, and it's not going away even if Russell Wilson goes away. Because until the person who is in charge of the team takes responsibility for what's wrong with the team, when they lose games next year and maybe fine, get what you want. Russell Wilson's not here. I don't know what you're going to do. You're going to sign Dak Prescott. You're going to see if you can trade up to number one. That's not an option. You're going to believe you're good enough to go with Stidham and get the same results. Okay, fine. But when they win, you won't have Russell Wilson to kick around anymore, so who are you going to blame? The next guy? That's a job I'm sure somebody's dying to get. Goodness. Well,